for tier number 6. Number 1, Fast of the Firstborn. The day before Pesaḥ, unless the first day of Pesaḥ is Shabbat, in which case there's a whole calculation. The Fast of the Firstborn is a fast day that falls upon firstborn sons and also maybe daughters. There's some debate on that subject, unless they go to a siyum, which means that in practice, basically everyone goes to a siyum because nobody wants to not be able to eat in the morning when you're preparing for Pesaḥ because it's a lot of work. It's because that was when the plague of the firstborn happened, and we're supposed to be like, oh, wow, we were really lucky, but, I bet that really sucked being firstborn then. Mimouna! Mimouna is the day after Pesaḥ, or the night after Pesaḥ, really. Originally celebrated in Morocco. The story behind Mimouna goes that the Moroccan Muslim community, according to legend, was, they're all Sufis. They're not as, to put it in Jewish terms, machmir on the alcohol prohibition as a strict Sharia would entail. However, the government of Morocco was very stringent on this stuff, which meant that Muslims were not allowed to drink. And that was annoying to them because they liked drinking and because they didn't really care that much about that prohibition. Under Sharia, there is an exemption for Jews and Christians to have alcohol for their own personal use. Understandably, Sharia does not assume that everybody needs to follow things like that. What this meant in practice was that basically every single Jew in Morocco had a speakeasy in their basement. The entire alcohol industry of Morocco was sort of owned and operated by Jews. So when Pesaḥ ended, the Muslims would come over to their Jewish neighbors with gifts of flour and yeast, and the Jews would return with brandy and wine, and they would have a big party, a big interfaith celebration, and wish each other Tir B'Hovetis Adu. Sigd is 50 days after Yom Kippur, an Ethiopian Jewish holiday. There's some debate as to when exactly it dates from and from what. But what is certain is that Sigd is a reflection of an idea which honestly is not really found elsewhere in the Jewish calendar, which is, while Shavuot is the holiday of the giving of the Torah, Sigd is the holiday of the receiving of the Torah. Sigd is a holiday whose themes are that despite everything, and the Ethiopian Jewish community has been through a lot, despite it all, we have kept our side of the covenant, God. There's something chutzpah about that, which I love. Because the implication, it's not stated out loud, because it's not great for liturgy, but the implication is, we have kept our part of the deal. What are you doing? Anyway, that's what I love about Sigd. It's amazing. It's the beginning is a fast day, the end is a feast day. All the Ethiopian Jews when they were in Ethiopia, they would make pilgrimages to mountains and have services there. Here in Israel, they all go to an area in Jerusalem, the Has Promenade. It's a little east of here, sort of hill over which you can see the whole of the city. And they have a big party there, and all the Kesoch, which are like the sages of the Ethiopian community, come and recite their liturgy. And you can get a bunch of great Ethiopian books there every year. I get a bunch of cool Ethiopian books there. So that's Sigd. It's really cool. The Ethiopian Jewish community has been very active in saying that everybody should celebrate Sigd, not just them. I was worried at first that it would be culturally appropriative, but basically every Ethiopian Jew who I've talked to has said, what the hell do you mean? No, every Jew should celebrate this. It would be amazing if every Jew celebrated Sigd. So feel no guilt if you want to incorporate Sigd into your own practice. As long as you listen to Ethiopian Jews about the way they celebrate it instead of just making up your own alternative explanation. Rosh Hashanah la Behema, the first of Elul. So we mentioned how Tu B'Shvat is Rosh Hashanah for trees. The first of Elul is Rosh Hashanah for animals. In some vegan circles, it's been celebrated a lot in recent years. There's actually very little liturgically that we actually do for it. Ironically, it's the first day where we start blowing shofar for the month of Elul, which sort of feels like we're putting the animals in their place. A while back, as a joke, I suggested there should be a Rosh Hashanah La Behema Seder with 4 different kinds of meat. And my friend, who's a vegan, said, please don't do that, even as a joke. I love this holiday. You're messing it up. So I did not end up doing that. Okay, so Yod Tes Kislev. called the Rosh Hashanah of Hasidus by Chabadniks and exclusively Chabadniks. It is the day that the Alter Rebbe, I think, it'll say here or here whether that was correct. Again, I'm not editing yet. Was freed from prison under the trumped up charges that he had been put in prison for. And Chabadniks celebrate with Tish, and they call it a big celebration, and, you know, it's a whole thing. So, now that we have gone through 6 tiers, we are in the 7th tier. We are starting to get into the abyssal zone. Let's start with Gimel Tammuz, another big Chabad holiday. Gimel Tammuz is the day that the Rebbe passed on, ceased to be, occulted. He died. They don't want to admit it, but it's like, just face facts. He's dead. He would be 124 at this point. He's fully, you know, gone on to meet his maker. Hashem Natan, Hashem Lakach, etc. I don't know why the ones who think he's alive still celebrate Gimel Tammuz, to be honest. You know, I'd need an explanation for that. But that's a whole thing. Minor Israeli holidays. We talked about the big ones, but here's some of the small ones. Yom Yerushalayim was the day that Jerusalem was unified during the 6-Day War. Nowadays, Yom Yerushalayim is most well known for the time when a bunch of really angry right-wing Jews march through the Muslim quarter and try to start shit. Not a fun day. Traffic is a nightmare. I never leave my apartment on it. Yom HaAliyah, 10th of Nisan, one of those holidays they sort of made up. Yom HaAliyah is meant to celebrate people who came to Israel. It was the day that Joshua crossed the Jordan. There's very little that people do on it. Yom HaPlitim. So, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but Yom HaShoah, a lot of sort of Mizrahim and Jews from communities which were not as impacted by the Nazis often look at Yom HaShoah as a bit Ashkenormative.
למה אני צריך להכיר את השמות של כל המקומות שלהם? את כל ההיסטוריה של הסופרים והפואט שלהם, את הערים שהם חיו. כי זה ההיסטוריה של העם היהודי. ואני לא ההיסטוריה של העם היהודי. למה הם יודעים מה שקרה אצלי? הם יודעים משהו? בבית ספר מלמדים משהו על השטטל שלי באפריקה.
This is unfair, because Sephardim also suffered immensely under Nazi rule in places like Greece and Morocco and the Balkans, but you know, it's not as well known as the suffering that Ashkenazi Jews went under. And in any case, a lot of Mizrahi Jews lived in places which the Nazis never came near. Iraq, Yemen, and they were all forced out afterwards in a massive exodus that largely was in response to the State of Israel being founded. Yom HaPlitim was introduced. It's one of the only holidays that I believe follows the Gregorian calendar, for some reason, to commemorate that. And it is, I'm going to be honest, a nothing holiday. There should be more. There should be a siren or something. But Israel still has a lot of issues with Ashkenormativity. As you know, it's improved somewhat in recent years, but there's still work to go. Kaf Sivan. Kaf being the 20th letter. This is the 20th day of the month of Sivan. It was a local fast day in Poland and in France. It commemorated a few things. The blood libel of Blois in France, the first major blood libel in Europe, happened on Kaf Sivan. The Chmelnytsky massacres, I'm certain I'm mispronouncing that name every time I get it wrong, which devastated the Jews of Ukraine, are also commemorated on Kaf Sivan. Kaf Sivan has a full series of slichot. It is a full minor fast day. Not kept in almost any communities these days anymore, but the liturgy's there. So, you know how when I brought up the 10th of Tevet, I said we'd talk about Christmas in the future? It's time to bring up Nittelnacht. Nittelnacht in Yiddish literally means Christmas night. Nittel from like Natalis. And it is not a happy day. Customs for Nittelnacht include staying indoors, trying not to make noise, not studying Torah, going to the bathroom in pairs lest the demons get you, and eating a lot of garlic, because everybody knows that Jesus is allergic to garlic. There's a beautiful and traumatic poem by Mani Leib called A Nittel. And the last line features the phrase, "The blood scream in terror of the knife." So, you know, that's what Christmas was like for the Jews in the old country. There are actually two different Nittelnachts. The Jews in the East, in Ukraine and in Russia, would commemorate Nittelnacht on the Julian Christmas, January 6th. The Jews in the West, in Poland, would commemorate it on the Gregorian Christmas, which is the same as the one that you guys know. I'm assuming, since I'm speaking in English, that you guys would celebrate the Western Christmas date, if you are celebrating Christmas, which, let's face it, you're watching this video, you probably don't. What this means is that some Jews keep Nittel on a date where Christmas is not being celebrated in the area, and other Jews keep 2 Nittels. And then, obviously, in America, Nittel is commemorated through the solemn communion rite, Yom Ochalsin V'Seret. The joke is that I said day of Chinese food in a movie. Local Purims, another favorite subject of mine. Throughout the Jewish community, there have been many times when the Jews in sort of local areas have been saved from their own personal destructions, their own communal destructions, their own individual destructions, and often they would declare a Purim for that community. There are a lot of these. Some of the most famous include Purim Saragossa, which was celebrated by the Jews of Saragossa. The story goes that the Jews were forced to parade in front of the king with their Torah scrolls, and then they decided to stop putting the Torah scrolls in the cases. But then an apostate decided to tell on them to the king. So the king stopped them and forced them to open the cases. But Elijah the prophet had come to all of the Gabbis and told them to put the Torah scrolls back in the cases. So the king opened them and the Torah scrolls were there and the apostate was punished, etc. Another classic communal Purim would be the Purim of Sebastian, which is celebrated by the Jews of Morocco, which was celebrating the defeat of the Portuguese, who intended to conquer Morocco and force the Inquisition upon the Jews of Morocco. And they were defeated. And Sebastian, the king of Portugal, was defeated. And if you ask the Portuguese, he'll come back someday. But if you ask the Jews, thank God that bastard is dead. There are also, in this sort of category of local Purims, there are family Purims. Some of these include Plum Jam Purim, Pivotal Purim, which is celebrated by the Brandeis family. A member of the Brandeis family was alleged to have poisoned a child by feeding her poisoned plum jam. But there was an investigation, and it turned out the kid had tuberculosis. So he instituted a celebration for his descendants. There's Gunpowder Purim, which was celebrated by Abraham Danzig, the Magen Avraham. When there was a massive gunpowder explosion in Vilna, in Lithuania, he and his family were spared. So he instituted a Gunpowder Purim celebration. There are all sorts of Purims like this throughout the Jewish world. The weirdest one I've ever seen was a Megillah called Megilat Hitler, which was written to celebrate the Allied victory in Africa by a Jew by the name of Prosper Hassin, who lived in Morocco in the 1940s and later became a Knesset member. I could go on about local Purims for a long time. They are a subject that I love, but I think that's probably enough for now. Yom Kippur Katan. This is a Kabbalistic thing. The day before Rosh Chodesh, some Kabbalistic Jews have a custom of doing a minor fast. I don't have it with me. I recently got a Siddur designed for Yom Kippur Katan liturgy. It's a kind of cool thing. There are mystical reasons for that, I am sure. I don't know them off the top of my head. And Pesaḥ Sheni. Pesaḥ Sheni is actually a biblically mandated event. According to the book of Numbers, those Jews who were unable to make it for Pesach Rishon, being the big Pesach, could make it up the next month. Nowadays, some people have a sort of mini Seder on Pesach Sheni. It's a Kabbalistic thing. They'll eat some matzah, but they won't clean the house out. And they'll, talk a little bit, but they won't do the full Haggadah. A while back, I love Pesach Sheni. It's a holiday that I really appreciate. And I have designed quite a lot of liturgy for it. I designed a Haggadah for it a while back. I've designed a full series of Yotzrot for it in the style of those for Pesach. I think it's a really great holiday. We've finished 7 tiers. We are now on the 8th tier. Let's start with Yom Simḥat Kohen, also known as Nomen Tag. This is the 11th of Tishri. In Morocco and India, it is called Yom Simḥat Kohen, the day of the priest's rejoicing. In Germany and in Eastern Europe, it was called Nomen Tag, the day of God's name. The day of God's name, it was so called because it is the day where instead of saying HaMelech, as you do from Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur, you switch back to saying Ha'el in Brachot. It is called Yom Simḥat Kohen because the high priest, upon finishing his Yom Kippur work, would have a celebration. I am a priest and I am also a cantor. Nomen Tag was a day to celebrate cantors, which means that it is doubly a day to celebrate me. So on the 11th of Tishri, feel free to send me money. Thank you. Seherane. Seherane is a Kurdish holiday. It was originally around the same time as Mimouna, but since Mimouna is so popular here in Israel, the Kurdish Jews have changed it to be during Sukkot. I don't know much else about it. It is not enormously popular these days, to my knowledge, but it definitely exists. It's just kind of been overpowered by all of the other holidays. Yom haMyuḥas, so that name means unique day, and that's a bit of a fun name. Yom haMyuḥas is the second day of Sivan. Why is it called that? Well, the first day of Sivan is a special day, because it's Rosh Chodesh. The 3rd through 5th days of Sivan are special days, because those are the 3 days before Shavuot, when the Jewish people are preparing for Shavuot. So what's the second day? It's 2 Shavuosdik for Rosh Chodesh town, and 2 Rosh Chodeshdika for Shavuos town. But it needs something. So the rabbis say, that's special day. That's Yom haMyuḥas. It's unique day. So it's also important. It is important in that it is a nothing day. That's just very fun, and I kind of like it. It reminds me of the midrash that we cover, the challah, so that the challah doesn't feel bad that we're blessing it on the wine. The 7th of Adar and the 5th of Av. 7th of Adar is traditional date for Moshe's Yartzeit. The 5th of Av, the attested date for the Arizal's Yartzeit. That is Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, who lived in Tzfat. Many of the mystics treated them as equivalent in some ways. Supposedly one person said if Moshe hadn't come, then the Ari would be a better prophet, or things like that. There is a liturgy of Torah study which was created for both, a tikkun, similar to that said on Shavuot. Obviously different texts. I actually have in the other room, again not with me right now, a tikkun 7th Adar and 5th of Av. Spanish and Portuguese Thanksgiving. That's what S&P stands for here. For a long time, the Spanish-Portuguese community has had a custom of doing what's called like a mini Hallel or a quarter Hallel on special local days. The Amsterdam community would do it on, the king's birthday, etc. In America, the Spanish-Portuguese community, which is the oldest Jewish community in the States, actually has quite a complex liturgy. It reached its peak of complexity in the 30s and 40s for Thanksgiving. A full ritual for Thanksgiving. With psalms and different readings and brachot. Nowadays, they mostly just do the mini Hallel, like everybody else does. But it is a unique thing. And people will go to the Spanish-Portuguese synagogue, either the one in New York or the one in Philadelphia, to celebrate S&P Thanksgiving. Some people will also go to the Turo synagogue in Newport. But there's some scandal there, which I am not going to be talking about here, because it is a very sore subject for a close friend of mine. Yom Niqanor. Yom Niqanor is a day on which it is forbidden to fast. It is also the same day as the fast of Esther. Yom Niqanor is the day before Purim, and it is the day that, during the Hasmonean revolt, General Niqanor was defeated by the Hasmoneans and repelled from Jerusalem. And because of that, it was celebrated as a day where you can't fast in Megilat Taanit, which brings us to the second to last stratum. The second to last level. We'll start with Yom Turyanus. Yom Turyanus is the day before Yom Niqanor. It celebrates something else. Unclear exactly what. We don't know who Turyanus is. We don't know who he killed. He killed somebody. We don't know why or who. A lot of things are unclear about this because the source for this, Megilat Taanit, is a temple era work, and it is annoyingly vague and written in very complicated Aramaic. So a lot of these holidays listed in Megilat Taanit, we don't know what they are or what they're about. The only holidays in Megilat Taanit which are universally still kept are Purim and Hanukkah. Everything else is considered nullified until such a day that the temple is rebuilt. But also, when the temple is rebuilt, we'll continue doing Fast of Esther. It's a bit of a contradiction which I have not seen conclusive solution to. Hey, Editing Isaac here on a handheld camera and a lower quality microphone. There's a holiday which should be included here on the chart, but it isn't, because I didn't know about it until I started editing. And that was after I had already recorded everything. The 15th of Kislev is a minor fast day exclusively for members of the Chevra Kadisha. That is also known as the community that organizes burials for Jewish communities. The members of the Chevra Kadisha would meet up on the 15th of Kislev and perform slichot and fast. Why? I don't know. I haven't been able to find it yet. I've only had a few seconds, and I'm recording this at the last minute. I will pin a comment if I can ever figure out a reason why. And finally, our last category of Israeli national holidays, Israeli holidays for specific guys. We'll start with 3 that were organized in 2004. There's Yom Ben Gurion, Yom Herzl, and Yom Jabotinsky. As far as I can tell, there are absolutely no customs for this. Some people might teach about the person in school. It's unclear. I've never met anybody who celebrates them. In this section, I've also included Yom Hereg Rabin. This is the anniversary of the day that Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated. Personally, I fast on it because I feel like we fast for Gedalia, we should fast for the modern day equivalent. But, I think most people don't. Now it is time. Let's start with the wine, oil, and wood festivals of Qumran. Why do we stop counting at the end of the Omer? Right, we count the Omer, and then we end with Shavuot. And then what? This question, which nobody in their right mind has ever asked, was asked by the Jews of Qumran, and they had a solution. Once Shavuot was over, they would count another 50 days, and then they would have wine Shavuot. And then once wine Shavuot was over, they would count another 50 days, and they would have oil Shavuot. And then once oil Shavuot was over, then the next week, they would have a wood celebration. These are festivals that are recorded in the temple scroll, Megilat Taanit, which was discovered in Qumran, and not attested anywhere else. It seems to sort of be their unique thing. Some people have tied it into a theory that there used to be a 50-day cycle throughout the year. There's a theory that the Amorites had a calendar which was 50, 50, 50, 50, 50, and then 15 or 16. There's very little evidence for this, but it would be cool if it's true. And finally, Yom Meturgeman. This one I need to take some credit for myself. It's not based on an idea that I had, but I think making it a holiday is largely my idea. Yom Turyanis is the 8th of Tevet. According to the rabbis, the 8th of Tevet is the day that the Septuagint was translated. In a miraculous process, King Ptolemy took 70 sages from Jerusalem and from Judah and forced them into 70 different rooms and told them all, you need to translate the Torah by tomorrow night or else. And they all somehow miraculously managed to make exactly the same translation. Now, the rabbis did not look too fondly on this because they didn't like Greece, and also because you could argue that the fact the Torah was translated into Greece is what led to Christianity existing, which the rabbis were not too fond of for pogrom-related reasons. But in recent years, some translators, by which I mean me mostly, have lobbied that it should be reclaimed as a day to celebrate the hard work that goes into Jewish translation. Last year, I wrote a series of piyutim, a full kedusha for Yom HaMeturgeman, which I am very proud of, which I will link in the description below. That is my entire tier list, my entire iceberg chart of Jewish holidays. Let me know if there are any that you missed in the comments below, and I will arbitrarily decide to put them somewhere. Thank you so much. Have a nice berg. Have a nice berg. Bye. Bye.